Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Now today is a special day because DxO have just released PhotoLab version 8. You can get a 30-day trial version or you can buy it immediately from the links down below this video. I've had the opportunity to work with an early release version of this for the last few weeks, so I've been able to put it through its paces. And this video is all about that process. We're going to review all of the new features, have a look at how they perform in my studio, and let's get straight into it. When DxO released Pure Raw 4 a few months ago, there was a new edition of DeepPRIME XD2. And there was some consternation in the community about whether that update was going to be applied to PhotoLab 8 or even PhotoLab 7 as a fix pack. Well, it was never applied to PhotoLab 7. However, PhotoLab 8 features a further advance in DeepPRIME. So what we're looking at now is DeepPRIME XD2S. And the results I found were quite spectacular. Let's have a look. Now, to demonstrate a couple of the new tools, I've selected a picture that is deliberately, I didn't shoot this deliberately to create noise, but I've deliberately selected this picture to demonstrate the new noise reduction tool, and we can have a real close look at this. So we go into Customize. Now this was shot at 5000 ISO. So this is going to be noisy. It was shot on a Canon 5DS, quite an old camera, but it does create noise a little bit. So first thing to demonstrate is the new loop tool. And here we can see the noise in all of its glory. That is a noisy picture by any stretch of the imagination. Now, staying with the loop tool, the beauty of this is if we come across to our denoising technologies, we can see that we've got the new DeepPRIME XD2S. Okay, and let's apply that, and you'll see the effect come up very quickly in the loop tool. Okay, so there we are, that's XD2S applied. Now it's only within the confines of the loop tool, so you will see noise in the rest of the picture. So if I were to blow the picture up, it would look very noisy elsewhere until I move the loop tool over it. So that's with XD2S applied. That's without XD2S applied. So fantastic job of removing the noise. Now let's take a bit of a critical eye and see how this is done in other areas. Now, one of the things with detail extraction is that you're basically talking about contrast. So you're talking about enhancing pixels where there is a sharp dividing contrast between a light and a dark area, such as this horizon here. And personally, I don't think that's too bad. I think if you're looking at this picture at this size, I think it's terrific actually. I mean, this is as sharp as you want it to be, and there are certainly no light halos here. That is very, very impressive. However, there is a gotcha, and the gotcha is that we have another new tool, which is lens softness compensation, and there appears to be quite a substantial overlap between these two tools. So if I have XD2S turned on, like I have here, and I turn on lens softness compensation, now immediately you start to see that black edging becomes a lot more pronounced. And if we take it over here, it's not quite so visible over here. If we blow it up to 200, it starts to become a little bit more visible. Now, I'm pixel peeping, but this is the sort of thing that can if you're not careful, really creep into a picture and ruin it. So if I were to turn this up a lot more, you start to see signs of over-sharpening appearing. Okay, so I think this is a case of handle with extreme care, like Clearview. Just handle with care. Now what I think is happening, and I don't know this for sure because I haven't spoken to DxO about it, but it looks to me as though XD2S, we know, does corrective sharpening for lens softness. Now the lens is identified in the metadata of this image, so ergo XD2S knows all about this lens. It's already applying some lens softness compensation. So I think what is happening is that it's applied here, and then if you take this up above 0, you're applying additional sharpening, and that is never a good thing. Now, I do not apply denoising technologies to every picture that I do. In fact, if I apply it at all, it's quite likely to be, because most of the pictures that I take are well exposed. You know, this was quite exceptional circumstances in that it was practically dark, and I knew there was the view of the clouds, so I just wanted to get as much as I could very quickly. But you'll see that high quality is still a reasonably large amount of noise. We cycle this through, we take this into prime, much less noise. Take it into DeepPRIME, much less noise, more detail retrieved. And if we take it into XD2S, really, even at 200%, it's a fairly beautifully rendered picture. So this is, I think, a good thing, but I think, as with everything else, use this with care. This is potential here for mucking up your picture, and I will just demonstrate how much we can do that. So this looks very over-sharpened to me. It's got this real hard black line, and you know, I'm a landscape photographer, it's important to me. This has got to look natural. So I think on balance, that's a clear win. I think the new noise reduction tool is fantastically good. I was really, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I'm very impressed with the noise reduction XD2S. There is the caveat around the lens softness corrections. I hadn't tested that in parallel with any presets that might be applied either, but my gut feeling on this is that this is a tool to be quite careful with, and that this is a tool that is intended to supplement existing corrective sharpening. So I think this really falls into the sharpening collection of tools. I think it's something like Clearview there, where you are well advised to be quite careful. Small increments make a massive difference. There is nothing worse than an over-sharpened picture, and this tool is clearly quite capable of delivering that in careless hands. Okay, now let's get on to the other major, or one of the other major introductions. Let's have a look at the new Hue Mask. Now, what I want to do is to show this in the context of luminosity masks, because masking on hue is different to masking on luminosity, and I want to show in this picture a very graphical example of each. So let's do with luminosity masks first of all. So we'll go into our local adjustments. We will find a luminosity mask here, and I'm just going to drop it here just above the horizon, okay, halfway between the two rocks. Okay, and you can see that it's selected a range here and that's effectively your mask. So any alterations I make apply only to that mask. It's not altering, however, the characteristics of the hue, and that is a good thing. We could do that if we wanted. We could warm this whole area up, bring a soft, or relatively soft reflection of the sun in here, the rising sun, and that would be a perfectly sensible edit, right? So that's what a luminosity mask is going to do for us. So let's have a look and see what a hue mask is going to do for us. So let's delete the luminosity mask. We'll go back to the original picture. Now, what we've seen is that with the luminosity mask, it was the brightness of the picture, it was the amount of light in the picture. So although we were brightening up this area and changing this area, we weren't able to capture any of that nice warm sunlight that's reflected on these mountains. So let's have a look at what we can do with the hue mask. Now if I pick the same kind of area, you can see how it's picked up here. You can see it's picked up the whole area which was very obviously there, but you can also see it's picked up areas on this rock, and that's nice. So if we want to make that slightly more obvious, we can bring this down, and now you can see those areas quite well picked out. Okay, so don't forget that's the mask, that's not the actual thing, but just so that we can all see this, I'm going to use this tool here to warm this area up. So we're getting that, and what we're seeing is now that this nice peachy sunrise colour is also being picked up in the rocks, and that's exactly what I wanted to happen, and it's exactly what I couldn't do with the luminosity mask. It's subtle, but it's a very, very good effect. Again, less is more here. If I increase the exposure, I'm bringing up the areas in the rock, but I'm also risking to blowing out the areas down here. So there is balance, but I mean that is the name of the game. So I think a win for the hue mask. This is something that I will certainly use all the time. It's a way of getting that little bit of extra detail, and the colours of that sunrise reflecting on the rock is a really good case in point. It really makes all the difference in a picture if you can actually work with that sort of balance. And the hue mask, used possibly in conjunction with the luminosity mask, gives us a really good way of getting at those tones. Enough about the hue mask. Let's have a look at the tone controls, because there has been a raft of improvements made to the tone curve, and I've always been a big exponent of using the tone curve in preference to some of the sliders, because I think it gives you more control. But with the additional functionality that has been brought in by DxO in this release, I think you'll find the tone curve is pretty much unstoppable. All right, let's have a good look. Okay, before we get on to the next feature, if you could take a moment just to go down beneath the video and like this video, or even better, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. That would be really helpful to me, and it would help get this video out in front of other people who'd be interested in PhotoLab 8. Okay, so let's start with the tone curve, start on the presentation of the tone curve. What's new is we've got the histogram overlaid on the tone curve, so you'll look at the shape here, it exactly mirrors the shape over here. And we've got the shading in our RGB, so you've got here red and cyan, so pulling this value down makes the picture go towards cyan, pushing it up makes it go to red. Green, you've got green and magenta, so pulling it down, magenta, up red, and blue, you've got blue and yellow. Okay, hugely exaggerated. We've got a new Luma curve, which will give us simply contrast, which is kind of true to the tonal value. Now we go through the presets, so light contrast, RGB, medium, heavy contrast. Then we go on to Luma, which is truer to the tonal values, light contrast, medium contrast, strong contrast. We've got a cross process, which is arguably horrible. We've got faded and negative, which is, yeah. And we can save any setting that we create as a preset. Okay, so this is all good stuff. Let's step through how we might want to use this. So with my RGB curve, careful to reset everything. As we know, the bottom end is shadows. Yeah, so we're going to lift our shadows. Top end is the brights. Brighten the sky, deepen the sky. Now you'll notice that at this end the effect is very little because we don't actually have that much to play with. This represents the amount of data in that tonal range. So if we were to pull it up here, you get an immediate and radical response. We've got loads of data in that tonal range, not quite so much here. But this is, you know, experiment and see. However, DxO have introduced a new control, which is the tone picker. So we can use the tone picker to choose a tone, and this will go on greys. Now we've got quite a lot of grey, but it's the least of the grey, if you like. So we can lift it up here, and we've got a much more subtle effect. Okay, we're still in RGB. Now, one of the interesting things about the RGB curve is it does alter the tonal values. Okay, so this is effectively RGB all together. So, as you would expect, it's amplifying the reds, the greens, and the blues. And if we take it up high, you can see this quite visibly. You know, this is all effectively different colours. Let's take it back down again. Now, if we were to do that within the Luma curve, and let's just pick the same area, there it is, we're not getting the same effect on the colours. Now, this is really important, and it's really important in landscape photography because I like to have real tight control over the colours in the picture, and contrast, whichever way you do it, whether you apply it from the contrast sliders or whether you apply it from a reducing exposure or however you skin that cat, it's going to come up with tonal and colour differences. The Luma slider here doesn't, or the Luma curve doesn't, and this is really good. Now, other things we can do here, if we take the red graph here, we've got red and we've got cyan, so we might choose to make our darks a little more cyan and our peaks a little more red, and we're getting into sort of dual colour processing here. If we go to the green, we can, I'll reset this because we're going to make a complete mess of it if we don't. So there we are in the green, we've got rid of the cyans, but we've got magenta and green. Okay, if we reset that, we've got our blue curve, Now we can do something actually a little bit more sensible here. We can make the sky a little bit brighter, so our blues are becoming a little bit more blue, and we can make our shadows a little touch more yellow to reflect the sunrise, the sunset. Okay, and this is all good. So we can do this by value. We can just pull this down. You can see that white point going down over here. Okay, take that back to 255. The gamma has been here all along, but let's just refresh what gamma actually does. Gamma will push up your mids basically and decrease your mids within the picture. So you've really got 3 layers of control now, which is good. If we disregard for the moment the RGB individual curves, but take the RGB standard curves, you've got this, which will increase our values along this vertical line, pushing that up. And as we've already commented, we can see that this introduces tonal and color changes. We can take that back. If we were to do the gamma on the same basis, with the same point selected, okay, you're getting a more evenly distributed effect. If we were to switch to Luma, go to the same point, and now we're not seeing tonal or color changes in here. So this is really important because you want to control the color values, particularly in landscape photography, but actually in portraits as well. Now I think about it, probably most fields of photography. So this is really good stuff, and this is new. So we can reset all and onwards and upwards. Okay, so that's the tone curve, and I think you'll agree those are real improvements which will definitely make life a whole lot easier for everyone that uses it. Let's have a look now at the compare tool. So there's a new tool that's been brought in which allows us to do a visual comparison. So this is different from copying the settings within a batch of photographs. This is where you've got a reference photo that you want to use as a model for your efforts at making adjustments. So you can set the reference photo up in the workspace, and you can use that as a visual cue to match elements of the photograph you're working on. Let's have a quick look at that. This is the compare tool, so I can set a reference picture and I can then continue to work on the picture here in the right hand screen in an attempt to get these two to match. These are chosen pretty randomly, I'm afraid, so they're never going to match, but let's just reset it all. And what we'll really be looking at here is this area here, and I can bring this picture up. And I'd be looking for some measure of uniformity around this, so I can't do it by I can copy settings from one picture to another, but not as part of the compare dialog. So you choose your picture from here, so original image and reference image. So this is the original, this is the reference Pico portrait. Okay, so that concludes the demonstrable features. There have been improvements made to the speed, and various background processors have been improved. I think this is a very, very good consolidation release, and more than that, I have found that several of the improvements have become absolutely essential to my workflow. So notably the loop tool I'm now finding myself using all the time. And the tone curve improvements are very, very welcome, particularly the Luma curve, because this really gives an extra piece of control. And I think that's probably the theme to this upgrade, is it's actually what we now have with PhotoLab 8 is a very highly polished deliverable, a very, very capable raw processing package with some real power to finesse the image and do very, very subtle alterations. So for me as a landscape photographer, this is absolutely excellent. I'm very pleased with it. So the one thing remaining now is to talk about the price. If you're new to PhotoLab, the license will cost you £209 or $229 or 229 euros. If you're upgrading, it will cost £99 or $109 or 109 euros. And there is a bundle that puts PhotoLab 8 together with Film Pack, and that will cost £249 or $299 or 299 euros. Okay, so thanks very much for watching, guys. Remember, you can get your download from underneath this video. There are links there for the 30-day trial offer, or you can go straight to buy. And we'll be seeing you next week, I hope. Thanks very much. Bye.